Hey everybody, it's me, Steve SCHNEE, the CD Junkie, and on this episode of CD Junkie, I'm going to be talking about a singer-songwriter by the name of Henry Priestman. And that's right, you're sitting there going, Henry Priestman, who's Henry Priestman? Well, guess what? You're going to find out now. And I like to start these episodes out by telling you how I got into this particular artist. Well, it was probably close to maybe October of 1979. Could have been December. It was somewhere around there, towards the end of the year, either right before my birthday or right before Christmas. I was going through the bins at Licorice Pizza, and I stumbled across this album by a band called YACHTS. Now, I looked at it and I thought, oh, that's really cool. This is what the album looked like there, but it wasn't called. The album was called SOS. It said SOS down here, and I wanted to know what this sounded like, but I didn't have the money to buy it. So, of course, I put it either on my birthday list or my Christmas list, one of the two. And guess what? I got it. And I went into my room, put the needle down, and it blew my mind. And for 41 years, I have been touting the awesomeness of this band called YACHTS. Such a great band. I never wanted them to be my band because every band I listen to, I want to share with everybody. I want to tell people, oh my gosh, you have to hear this. This is awesome. Listen to this song. Listen to that song. Listen how great their B-sides are. Well, YACHTS is one of the bands that really started me out there. Back alongside, the Jam and the Clash and Undertones and stuff. But none of my friends owned the YACHTS album. So I always was bringing bags of 7-inch singles over to play on their stereo, or bringing the album over, or when they would come over, I'd play it. Such an exciting time. 1979. I was young, dumb, full of bubble gum. It blew my mind. Great melodies, great harmonies, and they were from Liverpool. Actually, Henry was from Hull, but he moved to Liverpool. And then I started finding out more about YACHTS. Before their first album, they had a single out on Stiff Records called Suffice to Say. And back then, they were a quintet with a lead vocalist named John J. Campbell. Pay attention to that name. He's going to come up later. Remember, there will be a test at the end of this video. And of course, the SOS album had a live version of that didn't feature John J. Campbell. So I had to track that single down. So of course, I found it. I loved it. B-side Freedom is a Heady Wine. Just absolutely fabulous. Then I realized that there was a British version of their first album with a different cover and a slightly different track list, but same back cover. Some of the songs were either mixed around or there was a couple removed and some other stuff put on. But this was actually the British version of the first album. Are you paying attention? Not trying to confuse you. But every single was fantastic. Each single had a non-album B-sides. You had to collect them all. Then in 1980, they came out with Yachts Without Radar, their second album. Now, again, the UK and the American versions were slightly different. Mixed songs around, remove songs, add songs, all that fun stuff. But still great, wonderful, powerful music. Now, it wasn't as forceful as the first album. This album was produced by Martin Rushent, so everything was sort of spread out a little bit. So it wasn't as in your face as the album, except for the songs. The songs were still great, but I still sort of consider this their prog album because they have a couple songs here that are a little bit long, such as Don't Call Us and Out of Luck. And there's also March of the Moderates. Just lots of great stuff on here. And I really, really, really think that both albums were great, fantastic. Ben did put out one more single after that album, and then they split up. But all the non-album stuff is collected on this CD called Singles and Rarities. Now, what am I holding here? I am holding 3 autographed CDs from the box set. You can't buy these separately. You have to buy them all in the box set called Suffice to Say. This is the complete YACHTS, from their first Stiff single to their final single on Demon Records. Every album track, every B-side, it's absolutely fabulous. It is available that way. And that's how I got introduced to the magic of Henry Priestman. Now, remember when I talked about John J. Campbell, who sang vocals on the first YACHTS single before he left the band? Well, he went and formed a band called It's Immaterial. Now, Henry and Martin Dempsey from YACHTS moved over to It's Immaterial, and they played on a couple of the early singles and stuff. Now, by the time It's Immaterial put out an album called Life's Hard and Then You Die, Henry was not a full-time member. I believe he did help them in the studio. Here is the deluxe edition of the CD, so it's got a lot of remixes and B-sides and non-album tracks and stuff like that. It doesn't have the early singles. It just has all the stuff that was released around the time of this album, but it's still very much worth your while. They don't sound like they did earlier. By this time, It's Immaterial was John J. Campbell and Jarvis Whitehead. Both of them worked together so well. They created such a unique sound. And I don't want to say distinct because they tried different things with every track. So, you can listen to Rope, or you can listen to Driving Away from Home, and you could listen to Ed's Funky Diner, and they sound like three completely different bands with the same singer. So it's really a fantastic group. They also put out one more album called Song. This was produced by Callum Malcolm, who also produced Blue Nile. So this album is really closer to the sound of the Blue Nile, very moody. The songs are very melodic, very haunting, very atmospheric. They're not really verse, chorus. They do have these hooks that just latch onto you. Song is the second album by It's Immaterial. Henry Priestman, I don't think had anything to do with this. He is on this album, but I just wanted to mention this album. And they also have a new album coming out called House for Sale. Don't know if Henry's involved in that. While recording Ed's Funky Diner, Henry met a trio of brothers who sang. There was Gary Christian, Roger Christian, and Russell Christian. And then what Henry did, well, Henry's middle name, by the way, is Christian. So what are you going to do if three of the band members have the last name Christian? Your middle name is Christian. Why not call the band the Christians? And that's what they did. Now, this band, I think they didn't catch on that well in the U.S. because everyone was sort of associating it with them being Christians. Well, that's not the case here. That just happens to be their last name and Henry's middle name. This is the Christians. This is actually the expanded edition. This album did very well. It's soulful, it's pop. They have a lot of great songs like Hooverville and Forgotten Town and Ideal World, and this is just jam-packed with great material. How would I describe the Christian sound? Well, let's put it this way. When I started reading about the artist Seal, one of the reviewers said he's a one-man Christians. So if you like the sound of Seal, but a little bit more poppier, then you're going to love the Christians. And that was the first album. That came out in 1987. They followed that up in 1990 with an album called Color, and that was yet another hit. There was a song here that was just an enormous hit called Words. But this album is jam-packed. This is actually the extended edition with some bonus material, as you can see there. They also had a hit with the Isley Brothers' Harvest for the World, which wasn't on the albums, but it's been included on one of these, I think. But the Christians, second album, 1990. Now, one thing I forgot to mention, if you notice here, that there's only 3 band members. Initially, there were 4, but Roger Christian left the band before the first album came out, so that's why the Christians have always been known as 3, but when I was buying the first couple singles, they were a 4-man band. 1992, out comes Happy in Hell, another great collection of songs featuring Henry, Russell, and Gary. Sadly, this album wasn't even released in the U.S. as far as I know. I think the first 2 may have been. But then the band released a best of, and this has one of my favorite songs on it, which is a new song for this collection called Perfect Moment. But it has all the hits on it. There's a bunch of different variations on Christian's compilations. I believe that they have no control over that. But they actually split up after Happy in Hell and after this came out. But Gary Russell and Henry did reunite for Prodigal Sons, which is an independent album, but another great collection of songs. And after this, the band split up, and they did continue. They put out a few live albums, plus studio albums here, such as Speed of Life. This came out in 2012. Great collection of songs. Henry's not involved anymore, but he is friendly with the band members. We came out in 2015. And Sings and Strings, a collection of essentially Gary and an orchestra and a small band singing the band's hits there. Now, Gary actually put out an album in 1997 called Your Cool Mystery. Now, about 20 minutes before I made this video, I also heard that he put out an album in 2004 that I had no knowledge of. I should have done my research, and I guess I have to track that down and maybe update this video later. But what happened to Henry? I was talking about Henry Priestman. Then I got off into Gary Christian and the Christians albums without him. Well, guess what? Henry's alive and well. I should be talking about Henry. So I'm going back to talking about Henry. 2009, he put out his solo album called The Chronicles of Modern Life. When he signed the record deal, he was at that point the oldest artist to put out a debut solo album. Because remember, he'd been working with Yachts, Christians, It's Immaterial. He's played on tons of records. In fact, at the end of this video, I'm going to have a list of artists that he's played with, and you're going to be blown away. Chronicles of Modern Life, fantastic album. He's in singer-songwriter mode, a little bit more mellow, a lot more acoustic than anything he's put out before, but just a great collection of songs. In fact, one of his greatest songs ever is on this, and called Gray's the New Blonde. But there's a lot of great stuff on this. This actually came out on Stiff Records. Remember going back to the original Yachts first single on Stiff Records? He signed to Stiff Records for the solo album. And now it's not listed, but there is an acoustic version of Suffice to Say, that very first Yachts single that came out on Stiff Records. It's his updated version, and it's absolutely fabulous. So definitely check out Henry Priestman, The Chronicles of Modern Life. 5 years later, Henry releases The Last Mad Surge of Youth, another great collection of songs that you need to have in your collection. He's a great songwriter, and he's not pretending that he's that young guy in Yachts anymore. As he's progressed, he has written for his age. So when he was 21, he was writing with the energy of a 21-year-old. When he was 30 years old, he was writing with the maturity of a 30-year-old. I guess that depends. But and then by the time he's 50, and now when he's 91 or however old he is now, he's writing from the viewpoint of an old man. And now he's writing from the viewpoint of an elder musical statesman. And really, he's still clever, still writes these great songs. Doesn't sound anything like Yachts or Christians. It sounds like Henry Priestman. And that's the important thing. He has remained true to who he is as he has gotten older, and is absolutely fantastic. But that's not it, because then Henry and his touring partner, Les Glover, put out an album called 6 of One, Half a Dozen of the Other. Yes, so it's 6 Henry Priestman songs and 6 Les Glover songs. And both of these guys work so well together. In fact, sometimes if you really weren't focusing on the voice, their songwriting styles are very similar, and they actually work very well together, and it comes out just sounding wonderful. So that's definitely something you need to add to your Henry Priestman collection. Have you been paying attention? Well, what was the name of the guy that made that album with Henry? Yeah, his name was Les Glover. He also has an album out called The Love Terrorist, which is wonderful. Great songwriting. Looks very similar to the Henry Priestman stuff, because he's coming from the same area. This is when he was known as Loved Up Les, but then they put the little sticker on there that says Les Glover. Now, apart from working with Henry, Les has also worked with a gentleman by the name of Paul Cookson, and they put together this little EP for a Slade convention called Misspelt Youth, and that has a few tracks there. And then these two gentlemen got together with Slade's Don Powell, and they put out an album under the band name Don Powell's Occasional Flames, and it's called Taping the Hiss, which I think is sort of a play on Taking the Piss. But anyway, and that's another great collection of songs. It's just a bunch of goofing around, having a great time. It doesn't sound like Slade. It just sounds like a bunch of guys with some great ideas writing some cool songs. And then that is actually it. I know that this was supposed to be all about Henry Priestman, but this is kind of a Henry Priestman's family tree. And I touched on most of the people that Henry's worked with throughout the years. And I hope that you were taking notes, and I hope you try to track some of this stuff down, because Henry Priestman is an incredibly talented gentleman, and he has worked with incredibly talented people, and he is definitely worthy of your attention. So thank you for allowing me to babble on and on about Henry Priestman. I really appreciate you hanging out. Remember to like, comment, share, subscribe, and ring that bell to get notifications of future videos. I appreciate you. Thank you. And remember me, I'm Steve SCHNEE, the CD Junkie.